I'll officially start. You probably get a notice there, I think, at your end. They're saying you're happy to forgive, waive all rights that you have to any legal.
I thought you said waive.
Well, thank you for coming back and joining the session. I must admit, I wasn't too well yesterday, and I sat down on the couch at 5 o'clock and had a look at your submissions, and they were really, really interesting submissions, and I could really get that sense that you'd like belted them out, like to get a submission in, and I think that's a really good strategy in a way, because just you get the creative stuff out without worrying too much. It'd be like what I used to do when I was teaching adult literacy with people. Just write, don't worry about spelling, write, and then we can go back and fix it. And so, yeah, I got a really good sense of how you could apply that. And I just kind of made it. I mean, I have got no idea of your subject areas. So I really just sort of concentrated on sort of feedback about what things to think about in the event that you're going to maybe develop that out further. Though I must admit, I did spend a fair bit of time in the wonderful accounting company.
Bright Spark?
Yeah, because I just done all that today. I'd done all my BAS over the weekend, and I found that really, really interesting. And so and then the nursing one, that would look like a really good, I would think, probably nursing and accounting, pretty similar in terms of pretty strict procedures. And so, you can really sort of drill down into exactly what you want to see in those particular things. Whereas, like you've got a communications and simulation, it might be a bit vaguer, which is where today around role plays might be useful. So yeah, thanks for that. That was really interesting reading. And I saw yours late, Jane.
Yeah, sorry, I just picked the post. You must have gone to bed.
Yeah. No, they're probably out looking for my hearing aids.
Oh, no, I just didn't have time through the week, so I had to do it on the weekend.
That's all right. That's no drama. And really, there's going to be some of these that obviously you would really do just for the exercise, because you're not going to use it. So if you miss one here or there, that's fine. No worries. It's really, I think this is just really an opportunity to shoot the breeze with some possibilities. And then if you decide, oh, that's a goer, then as we get closer to your hurdle, then, we can really start to tighten up the ones that you want to select. So I think we've got about 5 different types of assessment, but you've only got to worry about 3. So I'm hoping you can see my screen okay.
Yep.
Beauty. So we're into week 5, or workshop 5. We're looking at role plays today, which is a little bit similar to simulations, but there are some sort of subtle differences. And it seems to me role play incorporates simulations in many ways as well. But before we start, I'd like to acknowledge country. We've all got different traditional custodians of the land, and The Age had a very interesting set of articles on the weekend about country and country maps, which was pretty interesting. But also I'd like to acknowledge all your heritage here as well. We've come from pretty diverse places and different mixes. We're all a bit like a bit of cordial. It's been mixed and remixed. So we've all got different flavours and things in it. So last week we talked about simulation, and I've already mentioned those magnificent responses that you provided. So that was really quite good. And we had a look at some tasks that could be assessed. And I think it was it you, Sharon, I think, who wrote to me and said, "Oh, I don't think I can find a simulation here," but you knocked one up anyway. So that was.
I was thinking more that I felt like the task had to be an observation-based assessment, like observing somebody doing a task.
Yeah.
And we don't really do that in accounting. We don't really watch them do a set of books, for example, or do a bank reconciliation. We give them all the stuff and say, do it, and hand it back in. So
Yep.
that's where I was coming from.
Yeah, and I think it lends itself to that without any worries. I was thinking about a couple of years ago, I was involved in a facilitated learning one that I kind of come back to. We got some money to write a unit, or I didn't get the money, but someone got it. And so we came to a situation where a student has to demonstrate how they would respond in a virtual classroom situation to sexism, racism, online abuse, whatever, how you would kind of handle that situation, how you contain it, confront it, address it, and remove the person if necessary. So rather than, confront and escalate. So we come up with a simulation which was automated. So it's like a quiz. And so it's like kind of like a video that unfolds of a group of people in a classroom, and then comment is made, and then the screen stops and you get a prompt for a multiple choice question about what's the best way to proceed here. And then depending on if they respond, then it goes to the next simulation. So next part of the simulation, you get another question. So it's about 10 questions in a 3-minute simulation. It was quite easy to do because it was just text in the text box. But so it's pretty similar to yours, except that's an automated thing. Yours was you're looking at the work product, aren't you, that you get there. Coretta was looking more at an observation and appropriate use of hand washing at particular points. And it was interesting when I was reading Coretta, I didn't mention this, but I thought, there's probably good opportunity in that simulation to also pick up some of the communication competencies there too, if they're communicating with a patient as they're doing the vitals and also PPE and all those kinds of things. So yeah, good, really good point. And that's true. It's very flexible. We can use it in lots of different ways. Probably a bit more flexible than case studies in a sense. Role plays. I'm going to talk about. And so we clarify what those components might be and how you might kind of retrieve that evidence along the way. And all of you developed some sort of skill-based instrument that student was demonstrating something to you, whether it be live or afterwards or remotely, and you were then able to kind of, give that. So I probably should just ask you, in terms of your action-based project and the unit that you wanted to concentrate on, are you starting to get a sense of what particular assessment instruments that you might make up the 3 that you're going to provide as part of that? Have any of these other assessment types made you think that you could alter what you're doing there?
Mine, I think I'm more looking at how I can improve. I've already seen some areas that I can make some improvements on, especially the support for the educator or who's running the class. So definitely making some improvements on existing assessment. Yeah.
So
other than that, I'm not sure.
So would because I'm not sure this is actually in the learning journey, we'll soon find out. Perhaps if I go back a bit, would it be of more use? I mean, we're doing a little bit of this incidentally as we kind of go. Just trying to see where those. Here we go.
I've already developed these as part of the Cert 2 program, and yeah, we're just continually improving on them. So
yeah. So would it be of use for you, and this probably true of others, to maybe we'd obviously talk about these, but to spend a bit more time talking about improvements that you can make to things like instructions? Yeah. And say marking guides?
Yeah, marking guides for sure. And that's what I found that, if a teacher's not completely, because I've chosen a unit that is not directly related to hairdressing, just to put myself in a little bit of, not so comfortable, more relating to work health and safety and that kind of thing. So when I was developing this one, because it wasn't directly related to hair, I did have a little bit more trouble relating it back to you know, the salon environment for the students. So I just feel like this one needs a little bit more work. So that's why I've chosen this one.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Mm.
So
Oh.
can I just confirm that at the end of this learning journey, we are to present you with all the assessments that we're going to do, say we're talking maybe 3 for the unit that we've chosen.
Yeah, that's how I understand it. And so it may well be that you've got 2, let's say, for example, 2 work-based projects or 2 skill-based instruments, so observation tasks, and maybe 1 knowledge, or you might have a simulation, a skills-based and a knowledge. It depends on you. So you can double up, types of assessments purely to you. And I think if you get them even to a good draft place by the end, would be good, because then you've got the building blocks to maybe finish it off when you've got a bit more time to address it. But if you want to push up some finalized instruments, that'd be fantastic.
Along with marking guides?
Well, I think if you could, I think that would be important. I think because I think they're the kind of the key, I think, to the task. I mean, if a student doesn't understand the task, then you've got problems. And if the assessor doesn't understand the task, then you've got problems. So I think we can address that fairly well. And it's really just about how we might structure the task in terms of language, and also what we might call the hierarchy of knowledge. How we present knowledge in a way that groups tasks and subtasks together, so it's easy to see what to do in a kind of block. But for someone to pick up an assessment, understand what the actual evidence that is required to be demonstrated, without having to question or second guess, do they mean this or do they mean that? Or I wouldn't do it that way. I mean, if it's too vague, then people start to interpret for themselves. So marking guide to me is almost the most important part of it, because you can have kind of dodgy instructions, but if you don't have a good marking guide, and I think I mentioned an example writing some content where an area I have no knowledge in at all, which was around being safe when you're working with electricity. Marking guide just referred the assessor off to a website. Well, that's kind of not good enough. You would want to say the student must be observed doing A, B, C, exactly what you think would define or determine, satisfactory. So I think that the marking guide is really important. So yeah, if you want to start to, so that's why we've had a few of you submit a couple of those, but I think that's the really important part. So maybe what we might do, depending on what you think, because I'm happy to alter this. I don't know how many of you use third party. Yeah. We can talk about it. Do anybody use that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, cool.
With Cert 3 we do as well, because sometimes the assessments are done in the workplace.
All right, cool. So what about this one? So work-based project might be, you might say, for example, you might be part of a team of nurses that look at improving infection control guidelines. That might be a work project. Or accounting might be working with a client and work out with them a chart of accounts or something like that. So it's like a kind of a project. Or you might develop a set of policies, procedures. So if there's not many of you on that one, maybe next week we can talk a little bit more about how you might look at, I can show you perhaps some examples of, marking guides. Whoops, that's not a good start. And maybe also we can talk a bit about instructions and language.
Yeah, I think my one's more about the knowledge and the theory, and yes, they do like a simulation role play, but I think I'd like to also add in, and I think it'd be worthwhile to add in an observation to my student as well, to sort of see them, you know, obviously doing this in the salon environment.
Yep.
So
It's a bit of variation for the student too, isn't it? I think that's
yeah,
because, you know, they must provide
Yeah.
some variety in assessment to keep them kind of fresh and, you know,
yeah.
not a set of knowledge question at all.
Because they're answering questions. I'm thinking about the assessments, and they're answering questions, and they're doing a bit of a project, and you know, they're attending this meeting as a group, but they're not actually physically doing anything in this unit. Like, we're not observing them. So
So you have to kind of get to the bottom of their
yeah, I think
thinking and
we need-
application of body knowledge to a
Yeah, I
situation.
think so.
Yeah, and I imagine it also, it's almost a kind of an opportunity for almost a group task too, isn't it? In some
Yeah.
ways. If, because I imagine the cell environment, people pretty in their own task.
Yeah, it's yeah, well, because they come into our salon where there's, you know, Cert 3 students also operating. It operates as a salon, so they'll come in and assist, and you know, they'll need to know what to do for certain situations, I guess. So that's why I'm thinking, and I'm adding in an observation as well, to gather a bit more evidence on the, you know, that side of things.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
That sounds good. That's a good
Yeah.
aim. Yeah, that's a good aim.
That would get me my 3.
Well, then, you know, I think even, you know, even the process of what you've gone through over the weekend, all of you, then it does give you an opportunity to, you know, play with what would be required to want to write that assessment for another unit, might not necessarily. All right, so I'll talk more about those things next week. I'll talk about work-based projects as well, obviously, but because you might come up with an idea while we're talking, and but we'll talk a bit about, you know, some marking guide and improvements and those kinds of things. All right, beauty. Jane, do you want to just tell me what yours was before I because other people, I know that Greta was pretty active looking at other people's stuff yesterday, but do you want to tell me just briefly what your submission was about?
Mine was not a role play speaking. Mine was writing. Mine was pretending that they were working at McDonald's, presenting a scenario for them, and that they were working in McDonald's and they'd been harassed and bullied by one of their co-workers, and they had to write 2 notes. They had to write a note to their co-worker who was a friend, and a handwritten note saying, watch out for, you know, Bob, he's been harassing me, and thinking about the kind of use to your friend. And then writing an email to your boss telling him about the bully and letting him know. Question simulation were how to write a workplace email, which was being formal, use certain format, particular language, particular register when you're writing, and the difference, looking at the difference between the note that you would write to your friend warning them about the bully compared to the note that you would write to your boss, and then they have to email, send the email to their teacher and attach a scanned copy of the note as well. But it was getting them to read the scenario and then saying, okay, I've been bullied at work, how do I write an email making a complaint about that? Okay.
Yeah, that sounds great. So, because you're really same issue, but attacked from 2 different genres. No, not attacked, probably the wrong word, but you got
and
the
of course,
2.
the things that we're looking at is, you know, their literacy, because it's literacy and numeracy they're studying. So being able to write a coherent, flowing, logical email to a boss that's not too wordy, that's to the point, but got all the components that an email has, instead of, hey, I'm being bullied at work, what the f are they doing? Can you do something about it? Let's make it, that would be the note to the friend, but the other one's got to be quite more formal and a request to do something about it, please.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that sounds really good. Great. Is that what you use now?
Yeah, we use something like that. And actually, when I was looking at it, because I was looking like Kerry to improving on that one, I noticed that it wasn't even linked up to the right learning outcomes. So that was very fortuitous. So I'm going to feed that back to say that we need to look at that, because I went, hang on, I'm checking over all the guidelines. I went, this doesn't even match up. So yeah, so it does, it gets you looking at, and then also on the other side, it gets you looking at the questions, because again, really examining the question, going, is the learner going to understand what they do here? And also, over the last couple of years, we've moved from using USB to the students to save something on their USB, because we don't use Moodle in our teaching and learning in general education, because they're such low level that we haven't moved into Moodle yet for them. So we used to get them to save things on a USB, and the questions talked about save this to your USB and then send the workplace email, whereas now we use OneDrive. So that all needs to be changed accordingly to talking about, on your OneDrive, do this, write your hand copy and scan it and attach it to your folder, and then email, just the directions so that they make sense to what they're doing. Doesn't take very long for things to be outdated, does it?
I'm having a few internet problems here, so.
I said it doesn't take very long for assessments and different things to be outdated, and we need to always be improving them.
Yeah, and the point that you made about going back and revisiting the outcomes is a really good one, because sometimes you can also identify with the addition of one simple thing in your role play or simulation can maybe give you an additional couple of elements in there, and particularly around things like communication, or there's often things around checking with supervisors or liaising with team members. So if you look at what you've kind of created, if it's a sort of situation, if there's any communication in there or clarification with superior, then, in your units, you can take advantage of that. And maybe it's just one simple question you might have to add in there to also gain some additional evidence for that particular thing.
We most of our general ed modules are all multi. There's just multiple learning, multiple units that all overlap, because it's all communication, reading, writing. So it's only when it gets to specific things like OH&S or employability skills where it's other things that it's particular, but there's heaps that we cross over.
Yeah. Oh, I look forward to reading that. That sounds good. All right. Now I better get my mouse. So we're going to talk about role plays today, and we're going to have a bit of play at making a role play out of a particular unit that we've got. We're going to do that in small groups. We've got 6 of us, I think, haven't we? So we should be able to do that. And I thought I'd show you this video, which probably explains role plays a little bit better than I can. So let me get it going.
Helping students feel empathy and compassion is valuable in many disciplines. But learning to understand the thoughts and feelings of others takes practice. Here's an activity to help. A role play is a created situation in which students deliberately act out or assume characters or identities that they wouldn't normally assume in order to accomplish learning goals. Here's how it works. Start with designing a scenario that requires interaction from stakeholders with multiple perspectives. Craft the basic storyline, initiating action through a critical event that students must respond to. Instruct students to form groups with enough members to assume each role. Assign specific parts or ask students to determine their own within each group. Present the scenario to your class and allow time for questions before students start role-playing. You can choose to let each scenario end naturally or set a time limit. Wrap up the project with a class discussion. Determine an appropriate evaluation rubric and decide who will be involved in the assessment. Detailed instructions and a sample assessment rubric are available in our free downloads. Use the rubric to assess the performed role plays. Then add up the individual scores on each rubric trait and determine a class average. Those results can serve as the basis for reporting course level learning outcomes to a variety of stakeholders. Role-playing is an engaging way for students to learn by doing, as it asks them to actively apply course concepts and understanding to embody a different perspective. Over the years, I've seen students develop greater empathy and understanding for others after experiencing a new point of view. Role plays promote significant learning in the human dimension domain of the taxonomy of significant learning because they require students to reflect upon the relationships and interactions they have with others. Here at the K. Patricia Cross Academy, we encourage you to consider role play in your class. Download our free support materials and step-by-step instructions to get started.
All right, so very nice classroom there. I hope you can hear me. I hope that was my experience was okay because I'm having internet problems here. It's scooting in and out. But it seems to me that the main issue here is that we've got students carrying out a particular role. So that they're playing a role that might be against character or against the role that they're being trained for to be able to kind of participate. I'm not sure if it was you guys, I mentioned this too, or the other group, but when I went to a Moodle conference about 15 years ago, there was a guy from uni who taught a unit called Engineering in Society. And it was a unit that no one turned up, low engagement, bad results. It was really about, what are the impacts of engineering on society, the ethical responsibilities. It was, considered a fairly wishy-washy subject by students. So he created role play. And the role play was, the scenario was that you're building a dam in Vietnam. And so it was really a, functional thing, consultation with locals, consultation with local religious leaders and environmental groups to protect the area, and then consultation with local authorities to tick off the compliance of the engineering standards and build. So everybody got a role. So some students were playing greenies, some were playing government officials, some playing engineers, and some were playing religious figures, which is very interesting. So I just let the consultation unfold. It's very, very kind of, transactional, and people in their roles. And then he put in an incident where some ancient religious artifacts were found in the body of where the dam was to be built, meaning that the religious order wanted a full excavation of the site before they proceeded to protect it potentially. So that's when the conflict started in the group. So even though they're engineering students, you had engineering students playing as greenies and religious leaders, arguing with the students who were playing with engineers and the government officials. And it got so heated, he said, that he had to have 2 face-to-face debriefings to get people out of character. So he'd gone from a unit that had been completely ineffective to highlight the role of the engineer in terms of their place in society and how engineering impacts and needs to be mindful of the environment they live in, to full participation and almost people kind of coming to blows. So that'd be quite different from, say, a simulation where you presented that on paper as an incident and describe a situation and say, in this role, how would you kind of perform, if you're doing this sort of solo. So I think it's the role that's really important that you kind of give students. So when you do, even if you do like a classic simulation where it's, say in a kind of allied health or health area, mental health, you've got one of my other students is in mental health and he has role plays. One student is playing the consumer or the participant, and the other is playing the counselor. And so they're occupying different roles to what they're being trained for. Certainly the participant is also to build that bit of empathy. So I think that's kind of the difference, even though simulation might be expanded to include kind of role play because you have to have that sort of scenario. But you think about the accounting example there, then that is like a true simulation. Student occupies a kind of a task role rather than a character role to complete the job. They just have to get the work done. But in a role play, you have to really internalize some communication policies and procedures to deal with particular characters, stakeholders in front of you to kind of get that done. So customer scenarios, patient situations, they're all kind of really classic for the MIST for role play type activities. But so yeah, it's really about a situation, offer jobs, one that replicates the workplace context, a bit like a scenario. You're trying to replicate that workplace context, give people real experience in a job-related skill, but you're taking that a little bit further into role play and characterization. So have any of you used role plays in your work?
We use them, as a communication in our communication unit. And then they have something similar like a team meeting, and they are given different roles. And then there's also in the meeting and comments as well on the communication styles and different things that they noticed as well, that forms part of the assessment.
So in allocating those roles to different people, you're probably giving them some background about the kind of attributes that they need to have to be able to occupy that role in a sense.
Yeah, so they have, different staff members that might have different personalities, and obviously a situation that might have happened, and it's a team meeting that they're discussing. They might be discussing, a disgruntled client, something that happened, could be, sales of a particular new product that's come in, and obviously, different personalities, different ways that they've communicated. Some might be negative, some might be assigned to be, the negative staff member or the one that never says anything or that kind of thing. And then there's the observer that observes, and then they all take turns, with the observing role to make their own notes about what they sort of witnessed.
Okay. So you kind of like having like one person who always sits out of the role play.
Yeah, so there has to be an observer on what they saw during the meeting, different things that they observed.
So this is a question, how do you establish the expectations of what those roles should carry, but particularly the roles that you're, assessing for should have? How do you build that understanding into the students before the role play?
Yeah. They get assigned a different role, and then just a brief for that unit. So it's not my one that I developed, so I'd have to look at it exactly to see what the brief was off memory. But
and I imagine you have a script, which
I think there's a script in there as well.
So what role does the the student, you said one of the student observes, what role does that play in the in your decision making, or is it more an exercise for them to identify for
Yeah,
themselves?
more for them to identify, because it's a communication unit. So 4 participants and an observer in the role play. I'm just reading what it says here. So as a participant, you are required to actively participate in a team meeting by sharing your ideas and completing the comment sections in the agenda page. So what are your salon's shop goals for retail sales? And what are your salon's strategies for improving retail sales? So that's what they're having the meeting about. And then there's an agenda, so of different discussion points. And then they're supposed to put some comments aside them. And then the observer needs to fill out the rubric of what different communication styles they noticed among the team members, and what goals and strategies did they discuss and how they were going to implement them, any challenges that they found, and then they would support each other to achieve those goals. And then there's, you know, another rubric, which is did they actively listen to one another? Did they use pleasant sounding voices? Did they allow each team member to have their say, respect each other, appropriate body language, listening and responding positively? I guess it just teaches them how to act, I guess, themselves. You know, not get all bored in a meeting. Obviously, you know, they can get a little bit bored sometimes, but yeah.
And I guess you also kind of helping them to understand how to advocate for their ideas too.
Yeah. So yeah.
And contribute to a negotiated.
Yeah.
You know, surrendering the ideas if there's no support for them, or.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, how do you prepare them for the role play? Like, do you do a practice or?
I don't think there's anything in this one. Sorry, I'm just reading it because it's not the one that I'm doing. But,
No worries. I suppose there might be some sort of formative.
No, there's not really. It's just the agenda. It's just the agenda, you know, which is retail sales have dropped dramatically. And the management have noticed only one team member is meeting targets. And there's also been an increase in client complaints for the time delays in services. So obviously they've got to come up with some, you know, strategies on discussion points on why they think that's happening and how they can improve it.
So who gets to play Tabitha?
You know about Tabitha, do you?
Oh, we're a bit hooked on Tabitha here. Well, my partner was, so you
okay. She's fantastic. Yeah, well, we can definitely assign that role to one of the students, that type of role. I did it where I made one of my students the smart aleck. You know, there's always a smarty in the, you know, that, you know, doesn't listen and, you know, can be a little bit argumentative, that kind of thing as well. So it made it a little bit more interesting. So
yeah. And then there's other communication aspects there to address, isn't there, in terms of...
Yeah, that's right. And look, you can have, you know, difficult clients as well, or you might have a client that's unhappy, you know, learning how to manage that, learning how to manage someone that's being disruptive during a meeting as well. So, yeah.
And I imagine working with diverse clients would be pretty important too.
Absolutely. There's so much to the communication with hairdressing that's really important and needs to be taken seriously too by the students. So I guess that's why having the observer is a really good idea, because it gets them to observe, you know, what shouldn't be done as well.
And give them ideas too.
Yeah.
I really like that idea.
Mm.
Thank you.
That's okay.
That's great. Well, it looks like your homework says you next week. That's great. Anybody else using a role play in their assessments?
Yeah, so I was going to say, actually last week in the week, I had a role play assessment with with two of our groups of phase 2 students, I think. Yeah. So it was an assessment task. And I know when watching the video, it said students have to assume a role that they are not trained for it to be, so they can get a feeling of, other skills that they think they need for their job and for their skills. But actually, this role play that we had, they still had to act as nurses. So it was a communication unit as well. And then, like, basically what happens in hospital is at the end of a shift, the shift that is going out provides handover to the shift that is coming in. So in the role play assessment task, the shift that is going out provide a handover to the shift that's coming in about a patient that has come in who is sick and who needs some attention from the doctor. So the role play, there's no text to follow. However, the student that is coming in to start her work needed to call the doctor to provide a verbal handover to the doctor about the situation the patient was in and why she's concerned and why the doctor needs to come and review the patient. So what we're assessing is how that student is going to communicate with the doctor. So we teach them about the appropriate way to communicate, what steps to follow, what things to include in your communication with the doctor so that it carries the correct information. So my role as a teacher was to see them doing that communication with the doctor, fictional doctor, and then see that they have covered all the important aspects as it was handed over to them by their colleague. And then at the end of it all, they have to write a progress, not like a report. And we're going to assess the report they have written as well. So watching them do the role of a nurse, reporting to the doctor about their patient, and then assessing the communication they have written down in the progress notes. That was what the role play was about. So they're still acting as nurses. I don't know if that should not be called a role play because they're acting as nurses, or if it's still okay to do it that way.
Yeah, so yours is much narrower role, isn't it? So you're in your role that you're going to be playing, and so you're really honing in on those situations where your communication is really important to get the doctor to fully understand what you're trying to tell them and to come and make that observation.
Right, yeah.
Okay, and so what the main aim of that is it really to kind of understand how to communicate with people with the full gamut of the medical profession? Because I imagine doctors would be pretty intimidating.
Yeah. So the idea of the unit was for the students to be able to know how to get comfortable how to communicate using the correct approach. So what we call the ISBA approach. So they have to identify the patient first, follow the particular format, because sometimes students get it all mixed up, and then at the end of the day, they get the wrong instruction because they don't understand what they were saying or what they want or what they are concerned about. So they need to practice how to communicate correctly, make sure that the person, because sometimes this communication happens over the phone, not necessarily, sometimes it happens face to face, and sometimes because it's about someone's life, sometimes you don't have to wait. Once you're concerned, you need to call immediately. And maybe you call a doctor is maybe doing something else, maybe he's driving, maybe he's in the park, maybe he's off, but he needs to be called to get information that is vital. So we are trying for them to play the role of a nurse, giving appropriate communication when it's critical. So you're seeing that they're following the right format and they're seeing the right information. So they're playing the role of the nurse doing that critical communication.
So it's almost an appreciation to an understanding of what the doctor exactly needs to know.
Yeah.
To give you the information back or to make the call about whether to come and see the patient.
Because when we give the handover to the patient, to the nurse, we see other irrelevant things as well, which are not important for the doctor to know. And you want to see that they are able to sift the information and get the important things and provide it to the doctor in a systematic way, so that appropriate care can be given over the phone, and you can document the doctor's comments and then you provide the care to the patient as required.
So what are the things that students in your role play find the most difficult?
So they find it difficult to provide to present that information in the right order. Sometimes they mix it up. Sometimes, sometimes they find it very difficult to say it in the right order and to get what is important in the about their patient to report, because not everything should be reported or not everything is important in that circumstance. So sometimes they find it hard to identify what is the relevant information there. And that's what we want them to be able to identify. And that's what we are trying to, that's a skill we're trying to get them to learn.
And so how does the role play, is it conducted in front of the other students, or is it more of a, it's just the student being assessed?
It's just a student being assessed.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And so do you give students some sort of training or template around what the order of information should be when you're communicating, either, like handover or to a doctor or to a specialist?
Yeah. So usually in class, we've practiced what the right order should be. We've practiced what a sample of a documentation, appropriate documentation should be, progress notes. Yeah, and then we've had scenarios, discussed scenarios in class, and have watched the teacher trying to do the same and shift the information that is important and giving them the rationale why this information is important and why this is not important. So yeah, we have done some practice. And then even though it's a one-to-one, other students are there, but they're not taking part. Other students could be watching, but it's just between the student and me at the time the student is being assessed.
Yeah, okay. Well, great. Thank you. Anyone else?
We don't do big, massive role plays. We just have tiny little scenarios like, an employee's approached you and wants a pay rise, that sort of thing. What would your response be? So we're really just using them, to be honest with you, to tick off on the communication skills, foundation skills. We don't develop anything big. We just like, oh God, we've got to do this communication thing. What can we do? Oh, we'll just bung in a little question, quick little 2-minute thing. Teacher always acts as the person, to the boss or the bookkeeper or something like that, and the student is always just given instructions about what they're going to talk about or what they're going to ask. So ours is not really. We could do much better. We could do activities much better, but again, it's accounting and bookkeeping. It's very task orientated, and for sure, communication skills are vital, but it's not what we focus on too much.
Yep. And is that reflected in because are you set 3?
4.
4, yeah, okay. So you're starting to get into that kind of small business management kind of caper, aren't you? So I imagine that there are some client relationships and those kinds of things in there. I mean, I guess that's almost another scenario, isn't it?
It's really hard to do role plays with students that have seriously no idea about, I don't know, the expectation of someone to come in and race through a course in 17 weeks and then come out as a bookkeeper with the ability to talk to a client and, all that sort of thing is, I find it really challenging.
And do you have, is it just the communication stuff is just peppered through the course, or is it?
It's really just the foundation skills. There's barely, I guess you could do things like, if there perhaps there was a criteria, explain this, explain double entry accounting. Instead of perhaps writing it down, we could do a role play where they explained something.
It's always a bit of a balance, isn't it, between the time you've got and
that is totally
conduct.
We deliver our course in 50% of the nominal hours, so we are smashing through the stuff, and the easiest way to get it done is for them to do something at home instead of taking up a whole, because it can take, these observations and role plays can take up a whole class, can't they? I mean, they do take up a lot of time. So we tend to just do these little tiny, and as I said, it's just a tick off of the communication skills. It's not ideal, but it's reality.
Yeah. In the last group, we had a woman who she did role plays with, she worked in aged care, trained in aged care, and her thing was she was vet in schools. So the students really didn't have much understanding of older people. A lot of students didn't have exposure to grandparents, or didn't have grandparents, or they left them in another country, or so there was a bit of a lack of understanding of an empathy almost for older people. So she has a role play where it's really around and getting to know an older person, finding out their concerns, understanding where they've come from, finding out a bit about their life, so you see the whole person, all that kind of stuff. And so she had 30 students, she had to do 3 role players, and each one took 20 minutes to set up or something. And so she's just drowning in time. So she set up she videoed the introduction. She made 5 videos, I think, and then she just did some multiple choice questions about what with most appropriate response here, like ask an open question about their past or whatever it might be, just to really kind of build that, sense of understanding of an older person. And so that was going to save her hours. Quite a bit of time up front to create the video, but then once it was set in Moodle, she would have been kind of set, forget. So that's that other option as well. She already had another guy involved to talk with her who intermediated the role play with her because she played the older person. So she incorporated a couple of other people being, interrupting and things like that. And they just filmed it on a smartphone and really kind of small, vignettes, and then have a multiple choice question for each one. When you just, got the video, better into Moodle, then away. I'm not quite sure how videos work at Chisholm where they go. They go to YouTube or wherever. But so there's technology options to get around some of that's difficult because, you are, you kind of got that balance. You're looking at the employability skills, and you're looking at the bookkeeper skills, and you kind of, I imagine you're trying to balance that all the time. Quite difficult. Oh, that's good. A couple of good examples. Anyone else want to share one before we move on?
I'd say we avoid it because our cohort aren't mature enough to be able to become a fiasco if you let them do it. We'd sort of be, I don't know, Jane would probably have the same sort of problem, I'm thinking.
Yeah, we usually do I was going to go after you, but we do a one-on-one where they go for a job interview. So I can appreciate what you're saying. Once you start getting into a group, I think you need to have built a rapport with that group, and you only see yours for a short amount of time, do you?
Yeah, we see our guys for 3 days once a month. So
it's hard to build that rapport to then work out a role play.
Yeah, and when you got 16 in the class, and it'd be different if I could run the whole thing as the whole 16. But when you've got, say, 3 groups of 4 or something like that, or and then they'll just end up getting on their phones and messing around and doing stupid stuff, so they won't take it seriously.
Probably need a couple of teachers in there and to do it as a whole big session and put their phones away in a box.
Do you want to come in and help me? You can come in and help me, Philip.
And tell them it's going to be an assessment, and it needs a lot of, with that. When they're not used to it, it's something they've got to be taken on a journey through, isn't it? To then be open to participate in a role play, I think, because a lot of them think got to get over that hump of it's uncool or it's a joke. I get you. I understand what you mean.
Yeah, a lot of ours are like they'll read a written scenario in their book. So it'll say, "Oh, Joe Bloggs does this and da 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 da," and then all it'll do is have a question at the end of it. So you couldn't really call that a role play or anything like that. Or if you were the customer, what would you do? Or just simple questions like that. But it never breaks it down. No.
It sounds like you probably did more. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was going to say you could probably expand on that though if they're reticent to participate. I think in person in a role play that's in the classroom, having a written scenario where they have to respond and say, if you were this person, how would you respond? Yeah. But if you were this person, how would you address that? Explain in a paragraph, like maybe that's a step prior to doing it in real life, is to get them maybe to write it down or even put it on their phone verbally if they don't have those writing skills, to say, if I was such and such, I would do such and such, such and such. But then again, if I was the other person, and then they could do it verbally, so you're still getting that evidence of them thinking and putting themselves in the other person's shoes, even though they're not writing it. They could do it verbally because they use their phones all the time, and then maybe send that in as a verbal. Where it's still reading the scenario, but then they are still putting themselves in the shoes of that person. If you explain and set the scenario up properly, where it may have 2 or 3 different people in it, a client, a builder, you know, a receptionist, secretary that might be being abused, or, you know, whatever. You could have 3 or 4 people in a situation in the written scenario. Yeah, interesting.
Some good tips there. Yeah, it might be a technology solution for you, mine, in terms of getting that participation and conduct of the role play seems to be the problem. So, but it sounds like a lot of your work would be simulation anyway. I imagine the task you described. I think described the task about building something inside a dedicated area. You rebuild and you strip it down and then you rebuild it. That's pretty much simulation, isn't it? That might be a better way to go, and use your questioning, you know, as the opportunity to get out any of those communication things. Build it into that task.
We sort of lost you there for a minute, Mick.
Sorry, mate.
We lost you there for a little bit, Mick.
Oh, sorry.
It went slow and then it sped up and then we lost you and broke up. Yeah.
I've got a bag.
You sure you're not drinking, Nick?
No, there's no. I didn't even have a drink.
That's what it sounded like.
I'm not even sniffing the lens cleaner. So I don't know what's happening with my internet connection. It was a bit rough on a meeting the other day too. It's might be starting to die. I was just saying you might be able to incorporate some of those questions, so it's less opportunity for it to be pulled down. If that's your issue, by incorporating into the existing kind of simulations and things that you're doing. So don't see it as a role play as such, but maybe, you know, consider where those additional knowledge questions might come in. Skills questions around communication, and, you know, so, you know, it could be someone does a, you know, poor job on a finish or something like that, but you've got a, you know, contingency question there about customer sees that, how are you going to respond, you know, that kind of stuff. Good. All right, so let's do a quick brainstorm. So this, you can give you a bit of a break from me. Take your annotation tool and just think if you can, I found this a bit hard, but see what you come up with, what you think some of the benefits for students or the benefits for the assessor might be for conducting a role play. So you get to annotate and you can select a text tool and then click on the screen and you can start to type. So I'll give you a minute or two to come up with that. Oh, Kerry, you won a prize, and I don't know how I'm going to get to you in a moment. This is my sister-in-law's all-natural hand lotion. It's very good stuff. This one is chamomile, bergamot, rosé, and geranium. So I can put a bit down the camera for you. Oh, you're much smarter than me. You've got hundreds of things. Now, talking about drinking, I'm a bit worried about that person. Oh, they took it down.
That's me, my spelling. I typed too quickly.
We can refer you over to Jane.
Oh, I'll tell you what, no time and.
While you're running, I'll tell you a story. Years ago, I set up a volunteer adult literacy scheme at the community house I was working at. And those days when you rang through copy, I was looking for tutors to train, rang through copy to the newspaper here in Ballarat to go on Saturday's paper.
Oops.
And you read it over the phone, right? So there, right down. So it was literacy tutors required, right? And then the word tutor was about 3 or 4 times. when it came out on the next day in the paper, the woman had written Tudors. So Tudor. So it sounded like I was trying to put together some sort of Elizabethan troupe. And the people who are the existing people in adult literacy were really concerned here in Ballarat. But it ended up on Hey Hey Saturday. And that was pretty humbling. So yeah, it can blow up in your face a bit. Oh, I see what you're doing there. Oh no, no, that's different. I think that is the same, isn't it? There we go. Well, some good ones here. So a couple of you kind of gone down the real life situation. And I guess there's a bit of a relationship to that one and there. And then we've probably got a few here that kind of sit together. That one's probably out on its own. These ones all probably sit together a little bit. There's a nice little bit of stuff around empathy. That's really important. You know, I think it's really hard. I think Philip's kind of experience shows us, you know, without some reinforcement of it, getting students to continually reflect on, I think this is part of the maturity being in the workforce, reflect on their position and how they can influence situations by their own behaviour, and continually monitoring that behaviour is important for all kind of work, and a really important employability skill as well. And yeah, kind of, I like this one, but get them out of their comfort zone because, you know, assessments are pretty, you know, confronting for students, but to throw them into the deep end where they have to perform and behave with attributes of expected in the workforce publicly is really confronting. But it's what they're going to have to do to find the workplace. And I guess no matter, can never really totally prepare them for that. Yeah, it's a good one. And also, like, the skills of the task too, personal skills that you have to exhibit, and real-time feedback, yes. So I guess when we're conducting role plays, we have to be very mindful of our own feedback approach and our own body language and, you know, our facial expressions to not enable them to contribute too much to how students perceive themselves. Yeah, and this is, I guess, part of the debriefing, which is really, I think, probably around reflection on performance and opportunities to see improvement opportunities. And even though the assessor will provide that in the feedback, then, you know, it's always good to have that discussion with students to see what their perception of that is. Yes, absolutely, this one. Yeah, and it allows you to build a relationship. That's a really important one. A little bit like group work, which is also really difficult to manage. And, you know, group work probably gone off the ball a little bit, but I remember it was probably a bit more popular when I was in vet schools, and some things was the only way I could teach that at the time, by having a group, small group. But the amount of work that has to go into managing students' anxieties about being in the group, their frustrations at their visions not getting through, not being listened to, did provide some really good opportunities to hear students and give them feedback. That's a really, really strong point. And see students in a different light. Yeah, so that's a great point. So we're meaning there, I'm taking from that students give you one thing when they provide you with written assessments and quiz results and those kinds of things, or work products, but to actually see them in action must be a bit of a joy sometimes when you see how they actually perform. I know with my event schools, kids, a couple used to really surprise me with how they presented. Sorry, go for it.
I just said, oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, beauty. So that's a bloody brilliant list. Because I really struggled because if you look at my woeful attempts here, this is all I could come up with. Whoops. I thought I had a slide, maybe I deleted it. Oh, I know I did. So here's what they come up with from yeah, so I think that thing about your mini scenarios, mini case studies, mini role plays, that's fine. If it's a really sweet small thing, might even be only a small interaction. You know, I know the interactions I have with my account are pretty short. Give me this document. Or have you thought about this? Here's your tax report. So, you know, it's fine. Answering queries from people like me who don't quite understand everything. So, yeah. All right. So what do you reckon? Let's do another one. What do you reckon the, for you at least, I don't think there's any right or wrong answers. What are the differences for you in terms of role plays and simulations? This was the one I struggled on.
I wouldn't have a clue. I can't think of it. To me, they mean the same thing.
Yeah, fair enough. I think about, yeah, I was saying. Oh, that should deserve a surprise. What have I got here? I've got this vintage Swiss Army pocket knife. I'm wondering how things give away. All right, that's a good response. Bit tougher this one, isn't it? I only last about 5 minutes on this. Oh, that's a good one. Oh, we had a good one there. We lost it. That wasn't me.
Didn't mean to do that. What was it?
I think it was something about, it was got a good point. It was something about, oh, no, what's not it? Yeah, such a good point that it's gone.
Free to.
No, I've forgotten. Ah, there you go.
I'll try and. There's a delay.
Yeah, I think that could be my my internet connection. It's very bad today. I'm sorry about that. But look, there's some good points here. So students physically doing the assessment. So there's just really a task for them there, isn't there? Simulation, we're really just replicating the work environment to complete a particular task, undertake a particular task in that sense. And I think this definition kind of there's good connection between those two. Can be done on live work. So I'm taking that to be get
That's why I put
sorry, mate, go on.
that's why I put the question mark. So I wasn't 100% on that one. Yeah.
I think you're on the money with this one though.
Can be done on live work.
Yeah, so it's it was Sharon's task. No, Kerry's. The counting task was pretty much working with a client and all the typical transactions that you would see normally. And that was their replication of the work environment. Students just process their accounts. And whereas a role play would be more, you would talk to the client with an open-end solution for a particular issue that they may have or concern that they might contact with them. So for you, it would be you do the work, and then, as I said, maybe the role play might be client you're building that for points out some faults, how you deal with those, how you address them, how you plan for rectifying them. So yeah, they're a bit. This is probably another good contrast, that multiple outcomes, depending on the role play plays out, might go deeper than you think. Whereas simulation, you're probably going to see what you would expect to see with the task. It's a bit more concrete. Students take on a role and play a part. So the role might differ from the role that they're being trained for. So in simulation, they would perform the task according to the role they're being trained for. But if you're playing the role of a patient in a health situation, then you're not being trained for that, but you're contributing to assessment of others in that sense. Pretty flexible. They're less predictable for the student, yeah, because you never really kind of know how someone's going to occupy the role. And students are free. I'll have to guess that one. That's right. I'll take the prize back, I think, for that. But yeah, that's pretty good. Pretty good. Yep. Oh, here we go. More control of the outcomes, and they're probably a little less concrete than a simulation where you've got pretty much this is how it should be done. So in all the simulations we saw over the week, they're all pretty concrete. You have to get to a certain point. And all those points were related to specific work skills that you need to be able to demonstrate. Whereas role play is more about understanding how to interpret how to perform based on the reactions of others or the situation you find interacting with others in, whether it be team meeting, customer interaction, quoting, whatever it might be. A mother complaining about the haircut, the haircut you've given their child. All right. This is what I kind of, after some research online, obviously. But I think the thing that I liked about this one is keep their own personalities. Whereas this one is, might not necessarily play against type. All right, beauty. I got a little task for you here somewhere. I won't labour too much on this stuff. So the first workshop, we talked about the assessment instrument, the instrument and the instructions. 2, we talked about the question types. 3, we looked at the scenario and how it might enable us to cover a few different dimensions of competency in workplace conditions to replicate the kind of environment they're going to work in. And role play has got pretty much it all. Probably got a little bit extra. We've got instructions, we've got our questions, and we've probably also got the script for the roles that each of the particular learners are going to kind of play. So obviously look at our training package first. Kind consultation with industry might be around typical types of scenarios for which you would create a role play that are kind of relevant, current, authentic, those kinds of things. You'd have to think about the benefits and limitations of using simulation. So that discussion we had earlier with you, Philip, identified some limitations there. There may be benefits. It's just a matter of balancing them and seeing how to overcome them. Analysing the learner's characters, their needs, and available workplace opportunities for creating a scenario. And I think, for the communication is the big one. And making sure the principles of assessment are met, which I think you can probably do by accessing that top one and giving a kind of a good look at that. So the scenarios, the role play components have got a few different things. It's got the scenario, and many of you wrote that scenario for simulation one, so you've got good understanding, an observation checklist, debriefing situations, supplementary questions, and any supporting documentation that you might have. Debriefing suggestions, maybe any kind of questions, but I think an opportunity to be out of character and reflect on performance. What did you do well? What did you think you can improve on? What didn't you understand, or where did you find that you weren't quite sure how you were to respond to probably reasonable questions for those kinds of things. Or, debriefing suggestions may form part of a written response at the end of the scenario, which might be even better. So, 4 mandatory questions about the improvements and identifying where they're kind of flagged. So we won't worry about a break. We'll keep going because we'll be in a little bit earlier. But I thought we'd do is have a crack at the writing a role play for a particular unit. So I've got a really basic unit called Communicate with People from Diverse Backgrounds and Situations. And we'll have a quick look at the assessment requirements. They're going to put you into a breakout room. So let's have a quick look at the unit. And I don't want a lot to go through, so I don't want to sort of bust our gut going through all that stuff. But here's the unit here. It's pretty low level. So if we hone in on, I thought the place to hone in on here, if we look at this one. So I thought that there's probably an opportunity here for a role play. And there's probably an opportunity here for a role play. So we can choose one or the other there, I think, to keep it kind of low key. So you might be able to come up with a scenario here where you communicate with someone from a diverse background. I'll let you decide what that is. The unit doesn't really tell us what that might be, but social and cultural is pretty wide. So probably the trick here would be to think about the cultural and social characteristics of the types of people who are in the industry that the student is going into. And that could be really broad, particularly something like a service industry. But accounting, you probably got some kind of understanding. Nursing would be incredibly broad, I would think. It could be virtually everybody. And then that would help you kind of narrow down who you use as the focus of the role play. So I can pick either one of those. And then if we go down to, as the basis for what you're going to do, and then if we go down to performance evidence, then there's a couple of things here. I think that's the opportunity for the role play. So you're in some sort of situation where you listen, recognise, respect needs of people from diverse social and cultural backgrounds. So almost by default, if you choose a social cultural background you want to hone in on, so it might be an older Asian man or a older or younger person with mental illness, whatever it kind of might be, then you'd probably need to get some sense of those people's characteristics to make that role play realistic. So you might need to talk to people from that particular background. Now, I'm involved in a meat work industry project as a writer, but we shot a lot of video at an abattoir down in Colac. I'm just been to a bit of coffee. Thank you very much. Cheers. And the really interesting thing about there, we're creating some health and safety resources, was they had a bunch of families move to the area. They provided, the company was proactive, provided jobs for probably about 30 men who'd recently come from an African region, and so the community was fantastic. They kind of integrated them, but they needed some training resources. So they consulted really strongly with types of learning these guys kind of preferred, situations they didn't understand, where the kind of barriers were for them in terms of integrating into work life, in terms of like workplace norms, health and safety norms, which are kind of different or absent in some cases. So from that came not role plays per se, but more informed, what we wrote and how we wrote it. So part of that is also kind of recognition adversity. So in different sections of the resource, we had different people from different backgrounds playing a supervisor role in the case studies we showed. So it's an English guy, next to an Australian guy, next to an Asian guy who worked in the plant, and then the last one was an African guy who worked the plant too, who was a supervisor. So understanding that cultural diversity to create a role play for this unit would be really kind of important, but you'll have to use your own kind of expectations there. So I'm not going to keep this pretty open-ended. I'm just going to say, have a look at those two things. And what I'm going to do is give you the link in the text chat to be able to check this unit out. So take into consideration one of those two performance criteria elements that I gave you. So I think it's 4 or 5 or 3 and 4, I think. And have a look at that performance evidence aspect here. I think that's the one. You only need to do one situation. So we won't belabor that point, and come up with a role play that you think could address that. I don't want to worry too much about scripts and those kinds of things, but let's think about the situation or the scenario that you could use where a person has to recognize and respect the needs of someone, cultural background, social cultural background, and then the characters that would contribute to that scenario, and maybe 1 or 2 instances of how it might play out. So even if you just brainstorm those as a bit of a quick idea. And what I think I'd do is, I reckon when you're in your group, I'll get you to post what you come up with straight to the discussion forum so that we can have a look at that together once you've kind of finished. I'll give you about 10 or 12 minutes on this, and then a little bit of time to post up your ideas. So just come up with a sort of simple script, like simple scenario. So at least 2 characters, and maybe 1 example, probably we have time for, of an interaction in that scenario that allows you to exhibit a student's recognition and respect for person with social cultural differences. So how's that? Does that sound clear as mud in a beer bottle?
Yeah.
As long as you come up with a scenario, a couple of characters, and maybe 1 example of how that goes, it should be fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a breakout room, and I'm going to put 2 of you in one room and 3 of you in another. So let me just get those going, and I'll give you some time updates, and I'll come and, I think you should be able to read the chat, but I'll come and paste this stuff into your chat room anyway. So let's have a look. I've got 2 there. Yeah, that should. All right. Okay, you're going to get a little message, and all you have to do is accept to join the breakout room, and then I'll come in and see how you're going and set up. Put the link in the text chat there for you. You've got a whiteboard too that you can use, so feel free to use that. Jane, can you see that little message to?
Unmute Jane. I can't click on it. I saw it, but now, and I was able to click on it. Are Jane and I in a breakout room together, maybe?
Yeah, I can't click on it. I'm still in the situation where you write on something, the little speech box
same
coming
thing.
up.
Did you create 2 breakout rooms or just one?
I created 2. So let me try again. No, I can't send it again.
Create another room. Put us in room 3. Create another room. I'm on annotate, like I want to annotate something.
Oh, okay. So what if you do?
Me too.
So go to your annotation tool and select the mouse, and then that will enable you to use your mouse.
There is no mouse.
So you go,
Oh, gotcha. Yep. Oh, there.
no worries.
Expressions as well.
Sorry, guys.
Oh, that's okay.
I'll just bring that link in for you, and just to say that you're able to share a whiteboard if that helps you.
Oh, I've just been writing. Where's the what? That's in the
under share, you should be able to. If whiteboard should be up the top somewhere, but that's only if you need it. But it might be helpful. If you select share, then from your
whiteboard. Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Cool. Good.
All right, I got it. So text.
That might be useful. Oh, now I can't get out of here. Oh, there we go.
So we went with.
See you soon.
Okay.
Oh, that's not right. Let's break out room. That's better. Hey, welcome back.
Yay.
How'd you go? How was the creative process? Did you find you started getting a few ideas once you worked out how to work with each other?
Yeah,
Jerry-
I learned how to use the whiteboard.
Jerry was all over it. She's already banging away on the keyboard before I even got started.
Yeah, so was Sharon.
Sharon was writing.
Sharon was a gun.
I went the alternative route. I used a Word document, so I
That's
spend my
probably-
life on Word.
Should have done that.
That's probably what I should have told you other guys to have done. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's all right. It was good. I've never used the whiteboard before.
It's going back. So I'm just prattling while I try to work out how to open your document.
You want me to stick ours on the discussion board? Can we just share our screen with you? Or?
I don't think I've downloaded it. So here you go. Can you see that now?
No.
Oh,
All I can see is the unit of competency. Is everyone else looking at the same thing?
try that.
Oh, that's better.
Oh, that's my one.
You used to go in not Zoom, but another program we used to use that got taken over. You could have a whiteboard, then you could open up again the following week and reuse it. So you could add to things progressively over time.
Oh,
It's a really good tool. But so, do you want to take us quickly through this? this was Philip and Kerry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I sneezed as you were talking.
Yeah. So we came up with obviously element 3, communicate with people from very bad spelling, diverse backgrounds and situations. And we sort of, observation role play. So a client consultation on a haircut. So we have participant one.
That's what we did.
Oh, really?
Did you guys copy from us?
I thought that was ours, and I thought that's not what we wrote.
There must have been a mole in one of the rooms.
Mine's terrible. It's all over the place. We had to move stuff and so we're scenario, client come into your salon, speaks very little English and is asking for a haircut. And we only got to the strategies. So did the student listen and respond in a positive way? Once they realized that the client had didn't speak as much English. Positive body language, I think, is really important, and using pleasant facial expressions while, because you're not understanding. Sometimes our faces can do strange things if we're, not sure of something. So being aware of that. And then using pictures to look at the haircut, seeking assistance from team members. And then Philip also had a great idea, which was using a language app as well. Which is really, really good. But that's where we got to.
So the stuff on the right is potential marketing guide stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. So we were
things
thinking more of an observer role. So strategies for the student, and then what we can be observed. So a checklist, I guess, observing the student doing the consultation.
So would that observer potentially be it could be the team member? They could seek assistance.
Yeah. It could be the team member. So, or another student observing if it's a role play. And then obviously, could do it in 3 and then swap roles.
Now, what was the hardest part of this?
Using the whiteboard.
That was a real test.
It was.
I'm sorry I told you to do that. That should have been
thinking really quickly on the spot, I think, was really hard.
So,
Did we really get 10 minutes? Because it didn't seem like
it.
Well, I think you actually got 15 because I had a coffee, filled the car with fuel.
No way. No way.
No, it was at least 12 minutes.
Jeepers.
I
I think we talked too much. We couldn't hear each other in the beginning.
We had a communication problem.
Yeah.
But creativity takes time, doesn't it? And so often in our work, we don't get a lot of opportunity to talk creatively about teaching and assessment strategies. So, it's not an easy process, and it is a kind of a toing and froing, isn't it? There's no kind of right or wrong component of it. What was the easy part about this, you guys?
I did nothing, so Kerry did everything. So that was the
Not just provide some moral support.
Or maybe was it thinking of an actual scenario for
yeah, you're right there. I reckon the scenario was easy, then coming up with the background for how to do it.
Yeah. Would it be easy to think of the end point and then work backwards, or what did you kind of consider there? What do you think would work for you guys? So you get if I give another 10 minutes. I won't though, but
so when we got the scenario up, that was fine. Yeah, like we said, but then once you participant 1, participant 2 working out, we sort of got the scenario and then sort of worked backwards, didn't we, Kerry?
Yeah, we did. And we went here, there and everywhere.
Yeah.
This is probably the end point, isn't it? They want a haircut. So you're going to clarify what haircut they're getting and
Yep.
So
Mm.
that'd go out with a mohawk or something like that, which they didn't ask for, or a mullet, which, yeah. All right, great. Well, thank you. Now what about the other group? Do you want to share something or?
Can I share my screen? Can you,
yeah.
can you allow me to share my screen?
I think you can. Yeah, you should be able to.
Yeah, I can. Okay, so
Yeah.
Hang on, I just want to remind you, you're not in a deja vu situation.
can you believe it that we had a scenario, but ours is a little bit more complicated. We had a hearing impaired Asian man getting his hair cut.
Oh,
at the hairdresser.
you're trying to knock off two categories there, aren't you?
Well, yeah, we're just thinking big picture. So we just came up with two characters, and we did it a little bit differently. We just talked about the interaction. So the hairdresser wants to ask how short the man would like his haircut. The man has trouble understanding what she's saying because he's hearing impaired. She needs to work out an alternative method of communicating with him. She started by trying to speak more slowly and use hand gestures, this short, this long. However, still didn't understand, and she showed him pictures too. She thought to show him a magazine and point out different haircuts and say this someone with a thumbs up and a thumbs down, and ended up being a communication success.
So pointing out pictures of Angela, Jolene.
I should probably put relevant pictures, do you think?
Yeah.
I'd put in the scenario that he hasn't got any hair. That'd really stuff him up.
No, it's COVID and he's only got 4 strands and they're very long.
So that was, and we same sort of thing. We sort of tossed around this. Straight away the thing was the hairdresser. We knew the hairdresser. It was something about communicating with someone that had English, and we perhaps not this Asian man might have very good English, but we chucked in the hearing impaired because I've had personal experience with a hearing impaired student before and communication methods. So yeah, we just chatted about that.
Hey, so what was the hardest thing about this, coming up with this as the creative process of putting together the scenario? Sending the text message to the other group saying what you're doing, and I think my internet's
Probably
gone.
feeling in the guts of it. I think like you start off and like you said, we kind of came to and decided on an end part, and then you think, right, well now what would go on in the middle? And that was not that was hard, but that was just where you had to think more about the different situations that one would encounter in that situation.
So we would have a script here for a hairdresser, and we'd have a script here for the hearing impaired Asian man. Did you consider that you would be the observer or one of the other students? Because that was quite a nice idea from the other group.
I guess for me, like as a teacher, it's much easier to manipulate. I don't want to say that, the role play or to direct the role play if you act as one of the characters.
Yeah.
So perhaps I would probably act as the hearing impaired Asian man, and then get the student to act as the hairdresser. And that way I could sort of ad lib a bit, don't understand sort of thing, and I can't, just use more gestures and things and be able to pad it out a bit as a teacher. And not, because you have a bit more confidence as a teacher, I think, to sort of act the part out, whereas students, they may not have that confidence to act out as one of the characters as much.
If you've got an Asian guy in your class, so he doesn't want to be role play material for every student.
That's true. Maybe we should take out the Asian man.
Well, you could probably look at your class beforehand, and then if you don't have an Asian person, you could put that Asian in, and then if they do,
Or just
swap
put
to something else.
non-English speaking.
That's
A
true.
good one.
And then you're not being discriminate of anyone. They could be from anywhere.
That's a good idea.
And if it was someone like me, it could just be hearing impaired cantankerous old bastard. So
But we're going to write that. We were going to write Mick. No, we weren't. No, we weren't.
This
Mick
is after
looks
you didn't find your hearing aid and you are now very hearing impaired.
I should have
Nick
shared
looks
that,
like he needs a haircut.
Yeah, I'm ready for one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've also got a seniors card, so I could probably have a discussion about discounts, which would be interesting too, wouldn't it? All right. Well, that was great. Look, so I hope that's given you a bit of a feeling of whether this is kind of relevant for you or not. I appreciate you having a crack at that. That was good. Good exercise. I think it's you know, a lot of this assessment stuff is really about being creative, I think. And so, you know, it's having the opportunity to be able to rehearse some of that creativity, which is great as well. So we've had some good practices there. Look, really quickly, because I'm out of time, I've got to tell you what to do this week. You can probably just tell me this. I think I've heard from most of you that there is a role play opportunity for you. So I think we'll wait to see what you come up with next week. Now, part of the problem with the Moodle activity is that they've put one activity on Moodle and so here, go back. Hopefully you can see that. Folks, there's a role play worksheet here, but they've actually given me two, and I reckon the second one is better. So the other one's just purely a marking guide. But I think it might
email to us, the right one.
So, well, I'm wondering this one might be a better one for you because it allows you to, you know, tease out the scenario before worrying too much about the marking guide. But if you wanted to have a crack, well, it's got it built in too. But the other one's just purely and simply, I think, the marking guide. So this one reflects a bit more what we just did, whereas the one here, I think, is different. At least I thought it looked different. Oh, maybe it's the same. Oh yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about. I thought it was different. Anyway, so forget it even existed then, just for a moment. So this is the task, pretty similar to last week. Look, really do the same thing, I think. Just do a brain dump. Don't overthink it. Don't worry about your spell check. Just get out your ideas. Try and put your setting and your script for however many characters you're going to have in. And, you know, with you, remember that debriefing thing around sort of maybe 4 questions, I reckon, around, you know, improving, reflecting, that sort of stuff, I think would be useful. And then if you've got an opportunity to maybe put a couple of these in just to get a bit of a start, that might be good. I know you did a couple of those in the last one. So again, don't spend any more than half an hour on it. Belt it out, put it in, submit it as late as you want, and I'll try and get to it next weekend. We'll see what your kind of ideas is. If you're definitely not going to use this, then don't worry about submitting it. Unless you don't have an idea, you don't think you'd use it, then that's fine. If you want to test it, think there's an opportunity to improve something you've already got as well, then dump that in, make any amendments you need, and then we can kind of go from there. Does that sound pretty reasonable?
Yep.
All right. Beauty. Well, I'll put that all in an email to you with the recording link and also the PowerPoint slides. And thanks for today. I had a good time. So I hope you did too. And
yes, thank you, Mick. It was
Thank
good.
you.
It was fun.
yeah, it was fun. So we'll try to have a bit of fun with the instructions and stuff next week too. Mark, guys. All right.
Perfect.
Bye. Got to go teach.
See ya.
Bye,
See you,
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.